Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of The Shadow Side with Safrianna. We are back with my final guest episode of the first season. I am so delighted to be joined by my friend Johanna this morning to have a beautiful conversation about what men really want. I know we're going to get into some beautiful stuff today. And as always, talk about some of the lesser spoken on things and some of the uncomfortable things that we might want to avoid or not talk about. I am so delighted you're here today, Johanna. If you would be so kind as to introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. I'm Johanna Lyman. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a women's empowerment coach. Interestingly, because we're going to be talking about men today, but I do work with a few good men, and I'm a little witchy, a little woo. And have 20 years of experience as an executive coach, primarily focusing on the so-called inner game, what your mindset's like, making sure that you can turn your inner critic into a raving fan, things like that. That's what I love getting deep into. And the shadow is one of the things that is near and dear to my heart and has been for 20 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for what you do in the world. Everything that you do is so important. And I love that you said, I do work with a few good men, even though you predominantly work with women. And this is something I find very interesting because I too, like my services seem more geared towards women, but sometimes the men find me. And they're always
Right.
very interesting men with very interesting missions who have big hearts and want to give to the world. And that is the truth of most of our men. They really do want to just show up and give and be in the world and have purpose and meaning. But society's really kind of spoiled that and twisted that and so much more. So let's dive in. I'm just curious to kind of pick your brain a little bit about what started to really bring home the differences and the similarities for you between men and women and what you were seeing they needed or didn't need in the world.
So, very small backstory. When I was in college and was first introduced to, well, not first introduced, but when I declared myself an ardent feminist, I was of the type of feminist that really did not like men very much at all. I would, get complimented by guys on the street or whatever, and I would say, fuck off.
Yeah.
Which I then learned is not really very gracious to deal with a compliment that way. And fast forward maybe 10 years, and I went to a mystery school, which is a fancy way of saying I got more in touch with my gifts of intuition and channeling and all that woo-woo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was introduced to the concept of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, which live inside of each and every one of us, no matter what kind of body we're in, to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us rely more heavily on one than the other, and that's regardless of what gender we're showing up in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when I got introduced to the divine feminine and the divine masculine, I recognized that, so all my life, my adult life prior, I had been trying to assert my power by being more like a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in corporate America for 15 years. And the truth is that there are major differences between men and women, and they're beautiful. And I believe they should be respected and honored. But our culture doesn't always go along with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that, this divine masculine and feminine piece, I'm so glad you brought that up because there is so much misconception in the world about it that, you're assigned male at birth. So you're going to be divine masculine. You're assigned female at birth, so you're going to be divine feminine. But we have this like mixture. It's like you get a little bit of some and a little bit of the other, and it might be 50-50 in your energy when you're aligned. It might be more like 80-20 when you're aligned, but there's no one size fits all. And those energies have also been so distorted by our society, right? Like the feminine, that toxic feminism, right? I love to talk about feminism and all of the how we kind of got it wrong, because it's supposed to be for everyone, right? It's for men and
Yes.
women, and everybody's been impacted negatively by patriarchy. But that divine masculine society thinks is like the provider and the always action taker and the dominant energy, and that the feminine is like completely submissive and passive and like can't make a decision, or like these strange narratives that we've put on it. So in your own journey, when you kind of started to realize, I'm not really even in my divine masculine, I'm actually in like the toxic masculine that I think I have to show up in order to survive in the corporate world and modern society. How did you begin to rebalance that within yourself, and how did that start to change your relationship with men?
Yeah. So first of all, it was so eye-opening to recognize that I had both. And I actually have quite a lot of masculine traits.
Mhm.
I'm very decisive. I'm like really quick to make a decision. I'm not afraid to share my thoughts with folks. I can be loud and proud. and, um, and so in that mystery school, which gosh, was like 20, almost 20 years ago now, it was there was a guided visualization given to us that allowed us to, or invited us to, actually connect with our divine masculine and divine feminine in a sacred space of guided visualization, and ask them what they needed, what they wanted.
Mm,
And it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because my feminine was freaking exhausted
I bet.
because she was trying to be like her counterpart all the time.
Mhm.
And so a number of those meditations got me much more in contact with the divine masculine and feminine inside of myself, and helped open my eyes to where I was expressing the more toxic version, which is, how do I want to say this? The patriarchy is toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll say most of us have been socialized toward toxic masculinity, not divine masculinity, which is all those beautiful traits that you described. Um, and then fast forward a few years later, with the housing crisis, and the market crashed in like 2008, 2009. And I went from having a full and thriving coaching practice to zero.
Yeah.
And one of my closest friends, who she still is one of my closest friends, at the time she was an exotic dancer. And she said, "You should try it. You'd love it. You'd be so good at it." And I was like, "What?" Like my early feminist is going like, "Wow, that's so exploitive." Blah, 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 blah. You know? And I said, "All right, I'll try it. Let me try a pole dancing class first, because I'm not always the most coordinated person." And I loved pole dancing.
That's so amazing.
Oh, so I was the strongest I've ever been in my entire life. And I was 42 when I started dancing.
So amazing.
So, which was great for me, because I had a really grounded sense of who I was in the world already. Um, I had not, I wasn't easily swayed by any other influences outside of myself. And I went into it thinking, oh, this will be so easy. Men only want one thing,
Mm,
thinking it was sex. Um, and I was right. Men only want one thing. What they want is the same thing we all crave: connection.
Yeah.
They want someone to see them, to hear them, to get them. And I was able to provide that as a dancer. So it was actually an awful lot like coaching in a surprising way. And I had guys who, this one guy in particular, paid me to talk to him.
Yeah.
He was in a very conservative religious sect, um, wife and their 8 kids,
Mm.
all that. But he was really lonely.
Yeah.
I mean, profoundly lonely.
Yeah.
Anyone who would spend a couple $100 at a pop just to have someone talk to them has to be pretty lonely.
Yes. And I think that is the epidemic with men in modern society is there's such a lack of models on how to connect, right? Like, oh my gosh, no homo has become such a thing in the last, whatever, 20 years. It's been since I was a teen that was a thing where it was like, no, no homo. Guys don't don't get close physically. They don't talk to one another. That's gay. Yeah, don't do that. I really am fighting for a world where men are more afraid to be seen as fascists than they are as gay.
Yes.
That's the world I'm fighting for because that's the toxic, like, oh, it's feminine to have friend groups and to talk and to have feelings because men have been socialized to repress all of that. But that's what they need to be healthy because they're bottling it up and they're sick and they die earlier and like there's all of the
All
impact
of
of it.
that. Yeah. Brene Brown said it most succinctly, so I'll roughly quote her, paraphrase more likely. So she's talking about shame. She's that famous shame and vulnerability researcher. And she said, for women, shame looks like a tangled spider web. All right, there's lines going everywhere and they're all tangled up in each other, and shame can poke at you like from any direction at any given time.
Mhm.
For men, shame is a box with only one message: don't be weak.
Mm,
And I feel like we have done so much harm
yeah.
with that message as a society. And I also, I want to, so more recently, I read um, the book on boys and men by Richard Reeves. And it's, I forget exactly what the subtitle is, but what's wrong with men and how we can fix it. And he says, like, for so long, people have been saying men are the problem,
Mm,
but that's not true. Men have a problem. And to your point about feminism, it's supposed to be for all of us. In the 70s, with the ERA, we lost sight of that.
yeah.
And particularly schools, I'll focus on education, they were so focused on helping girls thrive, which is great. Girls need to thrive. We need more female. I was just telling someone yesterday, God, I would kill for there have to been more female doctors 50 years ago, because we missed menopause would not be the mystery that it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
seriously.
So and that's one tiny example. All right. So girls started getting brought into STEM and the sciences and the maths and all of that. Um, Boys started getting left behind.
Mm,
Within 10 years, it was like the trend was noticeable. And by now, young men don't go to college as often as girls. They drop out more frequently. They are struggling even as early as grammar school. They struggle with learning.
yeah.
And all right, I'm going to put my soapbox away, but I'll say this one thing.
You're allowed to soapbox all you want.
Okay. In the 90s, I read an op-ed from Bill Gates who said that our schools are failing our children. 30 years ago, he wrote this. And he said the school system was developed to spit out good little factory workers,
Mm-hmm.
give them enough reading, writing, arithmetic so that they're somewhat literate, and teach them how to obey.
Yep.
And we wonder why fascism seems like a good idea to so many Americans right now.
Yep. Working as intended.
Working as intended. The system is not broken, it's fixed.
Yeah,
That's
and this is so important, this piece on the balance, right? I was thinking of this morning when I was thinking of this conversation that, like the Black Lives Matter movement, super important, right? It is super important to elevate the rights, the civil rights, the information, like everything around all of the impact that the Black and African American community has. We need that.
Yep.
That is important. We also need Jewish awareness and queer awareness and Latino and Latina awareness. And like we need to have all
And
of these awarenesses,
Palestinian awareness and disabled awareness,
all of
all
these
all
populations.
of
There's
it.
so many, right?
Yes.
And we also can't leave behind the white men because they have the most power in the current system and they're running around with so much trauma from this lack of connection, this lack of love. I think of who is in power in the United States right now, and all you have to do is go read his book to find out that his dad terribly abused him. That obviously was not a good condition to be raised in, right? And that's what happens when we're traumatized. We either become that bully or we become that victim. And we're using some generalizations today, and I do like to say generalizations are generalized. Everybody has their own unique situation, and talking about men might apply to some women and non-binary people as well. So men in general are really lacking that emotional education and that emotional awareness because they've been told that's weak and to shove it down. And they more often become the bully than the victim because it's weak to
Yes.
be the victim, but it's strong to be the bully. And so we literally see that playing out in the patriarchy right now. And I see this as like the toxic death throes of the patriarchy because so many people are like, yeah, no, we are having the conversations about everybody, and you are welcome to have a seat at the table, but you can't have a seat at the table if you're taking away everybody else's seats.
Exactly. Yeah. I often say, whether I'm talking about racism or sexism or ableism, it's not fucking pie, people.
Yep.
There's plenty to go around. And that's, I I love acronyms. And at one point, when I first became a coach after leaving corporate, I called myself an abundance coach. I had been a certified financial planner, and I was fascinated by people's relationship with money.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with the amount of money they actually have in the bank. And so I started thinking about scarcity mentality, that there's not enough to go around, which is the root of negative thinking, not
Mhm.
enough to go around. And that's a lie. There's plenty. This planet has enough food, water, shelter available for every single human being on the planet,
Yep.
but we're hoarding it because we believe that it's pie. And if I give you a piece, I'll have to take a smaller piece.
Yep. Mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is utterly mind-boggling.
And that's I sit with this question of, okay, how do we bridge the gap, right? How do we get these people? I don't want it to be the French Revolution all over again, but it might end up
Might
being at this
be.
rate. But how do we bridge this gap? And I've had a lot of men who have been clients who have said like, I'm so grateful to have had you as a therapist because like, you didn't play these weird gender games with me. And it's like, no, we're all just human beings and we all have our own niche experience. And yes, sure, there are some major categories, and like we can say men have these experiences and women have these experiences, but there's plenty of crossover. But how do we start to bridge this gap and get the toxic masculine to understand it's not weak to have emotions? It's not weak to seek love and connection and socialization. How do we begin to bridge those gaps?
Very carefully. Because the problem with people, anybody who buys into the message that I can't be weak, is terrified of being weak.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of being vulnerable with another human being, like, I'd rather cut off my left arm, thank you very much.
Right.
And yet that's where the medicine is. You know, there's a saying that anything in the right dose is either poison or medicine.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be a way for us to take that poison and turn it into medicine.
Yeah. And it so takes being able to have tough conversations and communicate. And that's the, going back to you're a dancer and you have this guy literally paying you to let him talk and take up space and have feelings, because clearly he's not experiencing that at home, right? I had a client who, I was a professional dominatrix for a short stint in college. It was quite the
Love that
quite the
about you.
journey. And the client that stands out to me, he was just like, I want somebody who doesn't think I'm weird and sick for the things that I enjoy, and wanted to talk during our non-sexual but definitely kinky activities, right, to express these feelings that he was trying to process through the play, because that's what it ultimately was, right? This
Yes.
breaking free from the constraints and the limitations to play and experience things in a different way. But it really was to connect and be seen as not a freak or not a weirdo or not perverse or whatever it might be, right? And that, I think that does go back to that weakness piece, right?
It definitely does. And I'm reminded of a client that I have who is a sex worker. And we were talking a few weeks ago about how the, the powerful healing that occurs in a session, it's specifically with BDSM,
Mm-hmm.
that like powerful healing happens. And she's very aware that this work is her sacred work in this lifetime. Like, she's very aware of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's and I love that for her and for her clients, because she does tremendous healing work for those people. And I think the healing is probably at the root of how do we change this. I think we need to acknowledge that every single one of us in this patriarchal culture has been traumatized to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
And unhealed trauma is never going to make a good decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh. That's my whole thing in the world. My offering to the world is the navigating of the trauma, because we can't run away from it. It just keeps playing out, but it's running everybody's show pretty much right now. So I would love, the sex worker and this healing. I want to really like go there, because there is this conception that men want sex more than women. I don't really know that that's true, first of
Is
all.
definitely not true in my primary relationship.
Yeah, I don't know that looking back, even myself, my clients, I don't know that I could say that that's true. But society has this idea that men only want sex. But in reality, they want that connection. And that's how they've been taught It's okay to connect. How many men out there sleep with a woman and then cuddle up afterwards and finally spill their hearts?
Yeah.
That's the one place that's okay and
Right.
acceptable to be vulnerable and not be weak because you have just had sex.
Serviced. Right. Well, and that, it goes back to the socialization of, in a patriarchal society, men are socialized to, it's okay to express anger
Mm-hmm.
and sexual thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Women are socialized for tears and smiles,
Yep.
the nurturing things. And so women who have really healthy sex drives are sluts. So we
Mm-hmm.
get the slut Madonna complex
Ugh.
with women, which I not a fan.
Yes. And then we have a very interesting other layer in society. This is a big shadow side, which is compulsory sexuality, right? It's the idea that everyone has to be sexual.
Yeah.
And the idea, because of patriarchy and religious control, that once you've given consent once, you need to give it all the time, essentially. And that has really made it hard to navigate on everybody's ends because this perpetuates that trauma, right? We have insane levels of sexual assault in the world. Like the levels of sexual assault and abuse in the world are so damn high, and most people don't know this, are so damn high that like you are in the grocery store and like 25 to 30% of the people around you are walking around with some form of trauma of that nature,
Yeah.
more than likely. That's
I
wild.
I don't know one woman in my life who has not experienced some kind of sexual trauma.
I literally only know one person and they're non-binary and looked masculine their entire life. Like I don't know, I've know
Yeah.
very few assigned female at birth people who have not been sexually traumatized, and I know lots of men and boys too. It's really awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So um I just watched a docuseries about the guy who like created all those boy bands in the 90s.
Mhm.
His name was Lou something. Um, he slimed the shit out of those poor boys.
Yes.
I don't think he ever did anything physical, but he definitely sexually slimed them. And, so that's been going on. And now we're in, and this is like a whole, this, this is the whole ball of wax here. We've got the incel
Oh my gosh, yeah.
culture. We've got the red pill culture, the Andrew Tates of the world, bringing back all of these toxic ways of masculinity. And
Yeah.
I just look at people like that, and like most of the males leading the country right now, like, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Where did you not get the love you needed and deserved as a child?
Yep.
Because that, to me, it's like, this drives my beloved crazy, but like, I look at bad behavior, I see trauma.
Yep, me too.
I mean, I'm a trauma informed coach. So I see between my own lived experiences and what I've learned, like, I see bad behavior and I just see trauma.
Yeah. And that's the root of it all. And oh my gosh, the incel movement, right? Talk about what men want. They don't want to like they don't want to subjugate a woman and make her their sex object and get their needs met, because that would literally destroy their spirit, right? And that's the I teach that compassion does not equal enabling, because when we enable someone to keep harming us, it's actually harming them too. It's not just harming us, it's harming their spirit. It's if you believe
Correct.
in karma, it's potentially accruing karma. If you believe in, well, trauma's a pretty damn hardcore reality, but like we will traumatize ourselves and others, and that makes us sicker. It makes us up
Yeah.
more angry and sad and depressed and anxious and like all of these swirly energies. We just want that connection piece. And where the memo's gotten missed is in that connection and communication piece, and it's instead these teachings, the Andrew Tates of the world that are out there teaching human trafficking, which is just humans are objects, and if they're a female human or a woman, like they're cattle, they're
Well, and it's
which
starting early too. Like the miniseries Adolescence. I don't know if you've seen it, but a
mm-mm.
13-year-old boy in England is accused of brutally murdering a female classmate. And I won't do any spoiler alerts, but being an incel has something to do with it. And he's a beautiful little boy.
Yeah.
The actor who plays him is just gorgeous and 13 years old, getting these toxic messages of, oh, you're never going to get a woman. 80, they do the 80-20 rule, right? Like 20% of the women have control over 80% of the men or something, some nonsense like that.
A lot of it's, yeah, just nonsense.
Yes.
But it's
Oh,
nonsense that preys on that vulnerability that's hidden.
yeah, and it preys on the fear that, newsflash, is a universal fear. There's something wrong with me. I'm different. And I have to hide that because it's not okay.
Mhm.
Every single human, I don't want to say on the planet, because there are indigenous cultures that raise their children to believe in their inherent self-worth,
Yeah.
but certainly any patriarchal societies, every single person inside that cage has that belief that there's something wrong with them.
Yes. I mean, original sin has really done a number on us, and I could soapbox about that for eons.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that is the hill I will die on. I'm like, that is Jesus didn't come up with that.
Jesus
Like,
did not. Jesus, as I tell my father-in-law all the time, Jesus said, love your neighbor, not just the ones who think like you.
yep. And Jesus was out there flipping tables when the rich were doing silly things, and
Yes, he was.
yeah, I could go there. But ultimately it is this, I'm longing for connection. I want to be seen in my authenticity for who I really am. But all of our men are running around taught that there's no authenticity. You are the provider. You work, you provide, you provide, you provide, you do, you take action, you go, you don't rest. Like, I even look at one of my partners who are always like uncoupling from what his dad taught him to do, right? Which is to work himself to death until he's exhausted and then collapse and then wonder why he doesn't feel well, right? Like, and that is too many of our men's patterns too, is like, I have to
Absolutely.
do all of these things to provide. And the thing is, we've been talking about, there are aspects or energies that do go with the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And the divine masculine is the caretaker. That's
Absolutely.
they are the provider, but it's in this loving, divine, open, nurturing, caring way that provides structure so
Yeah.
that the feminine can do the flow and do all of the ebbing and the flowing and the in and the out that energy does.
Yes.
But when it is
But
this rigid,
without that container, the feminine energy gets squandered.
mhm,
But if the container's too high, too tight, it gets squashed. And so
yep,
there has to be kind of a happy medium in there. And guess what? Like, if men are believing that they have to provide, first of all, they're going to run themselves into the ground, as you mentioned. They're also at some point going to get pretty pissed off about that.
resentment.
They're going to start to resent it if they don't feel like there's an equal exchange of energy.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm finally in a relationship where that exchange of energy is functioning as actually intended and in the healthy and I'm like,
Yay.
wow, this is pretty fabulous. It's amazing what happens when the energy is doing what it is divinely led to do instead of all of this societal construct and all of this thinking, this overthinking we do about how things need to look for us to get our basic needs met.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
It's tragic.
Yeah. So I think that the bottom line comes back to communication, which again, we have not been educated on. Communication is very challenging, but we need our men to step up and communicate what they want, what they need, what they value
Yes.
outside of what they've been taught. So I'm curious if you have any ideas, tips, tricks, anything that comes in that like you would share with a man who's struggling to connect or a woman who doesn't know how to connect back.
Yeah. Keep breathing, first of all. Forget that, and we're screwed.
Pause, take time.
Pause, take time. I am a really big fan of journaling. I've been journaling. I was gifted a journal when I was 13 years old, and I've been at it since. And what it does is it helps me to clarify my thinking. I'm usually an external processor, so I do that by talking out loud, but my husband's an internal processor, so he's not very appreciative of that. So the journal becomes my way of processing. And uh, question everything you think is true,
Mm,
because a lot of what you think is true is just stuff that your father handed down to you and his father handed down to him, and it's not well suited for the world that we find ourselves in now.
yeah.
um, Get some professional help. We are not meant to do this on our own. And that rugged individualism it does so much damage. And I really had to unpack a lot of that in my own world.
Yep.
But yeah, we're social creatures. We're not back in the day in like cave dweller time. If we didn't have our community, we were dead, literally.
Yeah.
Kicked out of your tribe, you were going to get eaten or starve to death or freeze to death. So we need each other. And I think that remembering is buried really, really deeply for a lot of us.
Yeah.
So get some help, journal on your own, reach
Find
out,
community.
find
Yeah.
community. You know, the Mankind Project does some great, great work with helping men to more fully express themselves.
Yeah, there are a lot of great men's retreats and events and groups out there, and that's, one of the reasons. And I'm pretty sure there's a study on this because I'm pretty sure I remember back from college, but I don't keep these things in my brain. But that part of the reason that men tend to die earlier is they bottle their shit up, literally,
Yes,
and they don't have the robust support systems that women tend to. And I find often, like in the queer community, for example, there tend to be more robust support systems,
yes,
at least socially, if not economically and resource wise, at least socially.
yep,
And that is what so many, especially cis straight men, are missing, is
yes,
that robust support system. Too many men rely on their spouse, or their girlfriend, boyfriend, to be that one person they talk to and share their feelings with. And that's too much for anyone's partner, right? Like, and any relationship, any gender
yeah.
combination, it's too much to have your one person be the person you dump all your stuff on.
It's such a trap.
It is. And so I am very much like, how do you build your robust support system? Find a support group, go to an event. There's so many events out there that all kinds of place hosts. Like there's a local coffee shop that literally does like social events where you can just go hang out with people at the coffee shop to do a thing. Like we have to be willing to expand those social horizons in order to gain that health and connection back, because of this myth that connection is sex, and this myth that love only comes from sex, from intimacy, sexual intimacy, from relationship. No, we got to do away with that,
Yes.
and do away with the idea that it's gay to have feelings, that it's weak to have friendships beyond partnerships. Like we just need to keep, I love how you said we need to breathe and we need to be gentle and like go very carefully into this because it is a minefield.
Yes.
And so much damage has already been done.
Yeah. It is that box that men are put in, that shame box. It's like Pandora's box, right? So opening it is fraught with danger. But one thing that a lot of people don't realize about that story is that when she realized what had happened and she had loosed a world of hurt on the world, she slammed the lid back on the box and saved hope.
I love that part. That's beautiful.
Me too.
Yes. So hope that we can bridge these gaps in connection, hope that we can move beyond these trauma narratives that keep everyone small. And
Yes.
again, that piece, everybody needs a spot at the table. There's
Yes.
all of these minorities. There's all who are arguably being impacted at much greater levels. That does not mean that we can ignore the impact on everyone, though. That we cannot keep ignoring, because we see what happens when we ignore. I love how you brought in that school piece today, because that's not even that. I was a teacher and I never thought of it that way. But yes, in the quest to make sure girls have access, are we giving boys enough access? Are we giving equal opportunities? Are we presenting non-gendered perspectives to everyone so that they can choose what energy is right for them? Because I do think, given the checkbox, most of us will try to fit in with what society told us to do.
Yep.
So, oh, this has been so illuminating and such a beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared. I'm curious, there's no pressure, but is there anything else that's on your heart to share today? Anything else about what men really want, or just a message for humanity that's on your heart?
Yeah. What men really want is what I want for them. I want them to feel whole and healed, connected, and complete.
Mm,
They deserve it, and the world needs it.
yes. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Johanna, you're such a pleasure to talk to. And I am sure that someone out there is going to get exactly what they need from this to shift their perspective on how to approach these
Oh,
dynamics in the world at this time.
yeah, I sure hope so. This has been a joy. Thank you so much, Safrianna, for having me.
Absolutely. So, until next time, my friends, this has been another episode of The Shadow Side, last guest segment of this season. What a wonderful conversation to wrap that up with. Whether you are a man, you know a man, I'm sure you do, uh, know that these are the struggles that they're probably dealing with. And how can you be more compassionate? How can you acknowledge that shadow side without continuing to enable it? That's the invitation here for you. So, I am here. I'm cheering you on. I love you. I see you. You know where to find either of us. All of the notes will be in the show notes below, so you can come reach out to Johanna if you want to talk or work with her. You know where to find me. Come join us in community. And again, until next time, I'm Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. Bye for now.